to Bill Nye the Science Guy.
For coming. I was really excited about this until just a couple minutes ago. Somebody came up to me and said, "Is Bill Nye your real name?" I said, "Well, it's William Nye." He said, "Well, why did you change it?" Well, hey, thank you all. My understanding is all of you, or so very many of you, have a copy of my book. I love you, man. So I wrote it because I realized that there are a tremendous number of people who don't understand the basic idea, the number one idea, the main idea in all of life science, which is evolution. So about August of 2012, I made an offhanded remark on it was heartfelt. I was serious about it on bigthink.com. I said, well, if you believe that the Earth is 6,000 years old, I paraphrase, knock yourself out, but don't make our children do it, our students. Because we need you all to solve problems and leave the world better than we found it. We need to, dare I say it, change the world. And that got almost 7 million views. Thank you. And then one thing led to another, and I got a letter from these guys in Kentucky.
Oh.
They really seem to believe it. I know. They really seem to believe the Earth is 6,000 years old. I thought for a while that this guy, the head guy, Ken Ham, and his right-hand person, Mark Boy, I thought they were sort of in it for the money. But I think they seem to believe that the Earth is 6,000 years old. And it's extraordinary, you guys. I don't know if any of you have gone outside here. I mean, not since, when, October. But you'll find fossils all over the place. There's Silurian fossils, 300 million years old. There's no shortage in New York State. And so, furthermore, the Creation Museum, as it's called, this thing in Petersburg, Kentucky. Petersburg, Kentucky, everybody, is across the river from Cincinnati. I mean, it's not remote. It's right there. I mean, machines and fast food stuff. There's civilization. Anyway, it's built on limestone. It's made of limestone, built on limestone. I mean, I don't know if you ever have been to Mammoth Caves in Kentucky. It's a spectacular formation. It's limestone, ancient sea floor, ancient seashells washed from inside, turned into this big cave. It's amazing. Anyway, this wouldn't matter. I mean, we could have these people in our midst who ignore everything. What would you guys be doing if you weren't here? Right? You'd be watching CSI Troy. It's coming. I'm sure it's coming. Anyway, this guy, they have no interest in evidence. Scientific evidence is just not their thing. And he's got a whole thing called historical science and what's the other one? Observational science. Yeah. So if you weren't there to see it, it doesn't count. Really? Dude, When you go into a building, you're pretty confident it'll stay there. You didn't see it get built, but you're thinking that maybe it won't collapse on you. Anyway, so we had, by the way, we're going to do questions and answers very shortly. I hope to take your questions. You guys, I love you all. No hugs, no selfies. I love you. Can I have a selfie? Not right now. I love you more than life itself. Anyway, I may have exaggerated. Anyway, this, it got, I don't know if you guys, how many people watched the debate? Really? There's 2.5 hours. Anyway, it just, I asked him about how could this family of unskilled shipbuilders make something that lasted longer than the best shipbuilders in the world could make a wooden ship. And if there had been this big flood, wouldn't you expect some fossils to be caught between the layers in the Grand Canyon, trying to swim from down here to up there, and they get stuck? And if there was some way to get boulders on top of the ground in what is now Oregon, without a real flood from a real lake in what is now Montana. I mean, if you had some way where they wouldn't sink to the bottom. How about this? If you could get light from stars that are clearly more than 6,000 light years away, if you could get that light here in less than 6,000 years, then we'll take a meeting. They got nothing. And the guy kept saying, well, I've got a book. I've got this book. And I am not a biblical scholar by any means, but my understanding is this big flood thing happened in the Old Testament. And so this whole New Testament deal is that I don't see the connection. I'm open-minded, of course. But the whole thing came down to this. I don't know if you saw it. There was a question from the audience. What, if anything, would change your mind? And I went on and on about the starlight and the frozen layers and the boulders and some way to build ships and all this stuff. And he said, nothing. Nothing would change his mind. Dude. So let's say this guy and his followers are on a jury, and you're accused of something, or better yet, you're trying to win a lawsuit. You're trying to get, some of your property rights back where he's parked his car on your land. Nope, made up my mind, I'm done. Evidence doesn't matter. My God, people, that is anti-science. That is not how we all got here. And by that I mean, if we had ancestors who were not interested in the process of science, who did not have hypotheses about things they observed in nature, and then tried those hypotheses, compared what they expected to happen with what really did happen. Those people are not our ancestors. They got out-competed by our real ancestors who did understand and embrace the process of science, whether or not they articulated it with Greek words and stuff. And so that's how we all got here, is through this wonderful idea that I consider the best idea humans ever had. You make an observation, you try to come up with an explanation, a hypothesis, an idea below, a hypothesis. Then you run a test to see if your hypothesis is correct. You compare what happened to what you expected to happen. That's beautiful. It's elegant. But there is an enormous number of people, there are enormous numbers of people in our midst who will accept all that science has brought humankind, lights, microphones, polyester carpeting, plexiglass, but don't want to embrace the consequences. And the consequences are that, near as anybody can tell, everybody on Earth, and by everybody I mean all the humans and the mushrooms, try to indoctrinate kids into this extraordinary worldview, which, from a scientific standpoint, is obviously wrong. And this wouldn't matter, except we need young people to be engaged, because we've got a huge problem. Along with everything else, Ken Ham and his followers aggressively deny climate change, insist that the Earth is actually cooling, it's not getting warmer. Well, that also, everybody, is wrong. The world is getting warmer. And for those of you coming of age right now, you should be a little ticked off. Because James Hansen, who works for NASA, testified in front of Congress June 23rd, 1988, showed that the world's getting warmer because of all the carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases like natural gas, methane, putting in the air. And my people of my age, have done hardly anything about it. But here's what happened, you guys. When I was 9 years old, we went to the World's Fair in New York City. The town's so nice, they named it twice. They had a total board, a tote board, of the human population at that time. Now listen, I'm my dad's son. I guess that's not extraordinary. This is the guy, my father's the guy who slows the car way down on Route 40, south of Baltimore, Maryland, and starts taking pictures of the car's odometer as it changes from 99,999 to 100,000, right? Then the cop pulls us over. Sir, what are you doing? I'm taking pictures of the odometer, you know, with a macro lens on my Pentax. Sir, really, it's a highway. Anyway, that guy took us to the World's Fair, and they had a tote board, a total board of the world's population of people. And we had just missed it. Just missed it by a couple, 3 hours. Changing, not from 99,999, no, from 2,999,999,999 people to 3 billion people. That was in 1965. Well, today, if you go to the U.S. Census population clock on the electric computer machine that the kids are using, you will see that the human population is now 7.2 billion people. So in my lifetime, it is more than double. I mean, not just more than, substantially more than double. 30% more than double in my lifetime. Okay, that's one thing. Then the other thing, you guys, if we had some amazing, crazy ladder car and some fabulous ladder road, and we could drive straight up for an hour, we'd be in outer space. Like, it's right there, you guys. It's 100 kilometers, 60-something miles. And then you're pretty much in outer space. And you would notice it right away. If you roll down the window, and so it is those two things, you guys. We got 7 billion people burning and breathing the atmosphere, and the atmosphere is like that thick. It's like, as the old saying goes, a layer of varnish on a classroom globe. When you look at the Earth from space, you can hardly even see that there's an atmosphere, a layer of gas. And so that's it. That's why the climate's changing. 7 billion people burning and breathing. And that was there. And so here we are. And so I want you all to, dare I say it, change the world. And that should be no problem. My parents, I am so old. How old are you? My parents were both in World War II. My dad wanted to marry this gal when he was in college. My dad went to Johns Hopkins, which is in Baltimore someplace. And my mom went to Goucher College, back when we had such things. It was the sister school to Johns Hopkins. And her father would not let them get married till she was graduated from college. This is, quite some time ago. So my dad wanted to earn money so that he would be a worthy partner for this guy's daughter. For his girlfriend, who was my mother, and became my mother eventually, not to reveal too much. So he took a job on Wake Island. I don't know if you've ever heard of Wake Island. You go to Hawaii, and then you go about that far again, 5,000 more nautical miles in the middle Pacific Ocean. And at that time, people didn't really think that the problems that were going on in Europe, which involved tanks and bombs and mass murder, which is undesirable generally, they didn't think that would end up in the U.S. They thought that was on another shore. And no one really kind of got their heads around the idea that on December 8th on Wake Island, which was December 7th in Pearl Harbor, that Wake Island would be bombed. But it was the same attack. Pearl Harbor, Wake, other targets in the Pacific were bombed. The Japanese military declared war on the U.S., and one thing led to another. My father and his guys shot back for 2 weeks. They fought back for 2 weeks. They were captured on Christmas Eve, 1941. If you guys get a chance to spend 4 years as a prisoner of war, I would not do it. Just let that go. Let that opportunity slide by. But that denial that things could go wrong led to a huge problem. Meanwhile, so by the way, these guys just disappeared. This is 1941, the radio was bombed, the radios were bombed, and these guys were captured. They did not have any way to communicate with the States, with the mainland. And, Hawaii wasn't even a state back then, by the way. And it was, they had no Twitter or Facebook. Yeah, like, what did they do all day? So they built an airstrip. I don't know what. Yeah. So my mom was graduated in 1942, and the dean of students at Goucher College was Dorothy Stimson, who happened to be the first cousin of Henry Stimson, who happened to be the Secretary of War. This was back when it was called the Department of War. Now it's the Department of Defense. We're defending ourselves. Okay. Seriously, guys, I'm not sure if it would be better, but I think it would be different if the name were changed back to the Department of War. I think people would just look at the business a little differently. Like, are we defending our oil fields on the other side of the world? I'm not sure. Well, I'm not sure if it would be better or not, but it's something to think about. Anyway, Dorothy Stimson says to Henry Stimson, do you have any women that can come work on this thing? I can't tell you what it is. So my mom and several of her classmates were recruited by the Navy to work on the Enigma Code.
Oh my God.
Because she was recruited because the family myth is she was good at math and science. Could be. Anyway, they would not talk about it. I met many of the gals over the years. And what did you do during the war, Mom? No, I can't talk about it. Oh. Anyway, they were declassified in 1992, and 50 freaking years later, and they just wouldn't talk about it. My nephew tried to do a report, tried to interview his grandmother, not looking at time. Anyway, those people, my dad lived through it, came back, married my mom. My mom always said my father was a very good dancer. And I guess one thing led to another. And here I am. I have an older brother and older sister. I guess they figured it out. I don't know. Anyway, they were part of what's now called the Greatest Generation, where people fighting the war just got together. I mean, I look back at the music from that time. There's a song called Rosie the Riveter. There's a song called Milkman, Keep Those Bottles Quiet, because it doesn't want the milkman clinking the bottles and waking the woman up who's working on the swing shift making tanks and bombers. There's People Like You and Me. That's the name of a song where they say, look at those gobs. That's a sailor of gobs. They say, look at those gobs doing their jobs, keeping the sea lanes free. And all those guys flying up in the skies, winging to victory. for people like you and me. In other words, the popular music was about the war effort. There were posters everywhere about conserving and doing more with less. And these people got together and they out-competed the other side. They mostly outproduced the enemy so that they could resolve this conflict. And I think that you guys can be the next great generation. Working together, you all can, dare I say it, change the world. Now, on my house, I still have a house in Los Angeles. I live in Studio City, which is like in the valley. It's really in the valley. And that was the first time, I'll just tell you ladies, is the first time I heard two women calling each other dude. When I first moved there. Do you guys do that?
Yeah.
Dude.
Yeah.
So I said, dude. And then she said it right to her face. Which is like so different than just like anyway, that's where I live. That's where I have a house. And I have a solar hot water system. I don't know if you've ever seen one of these.
Woo!
It's a box with pipes in it, and the sun shines on the box and the pipes get hot. That's it. It is not rocket surgery, okay? It's a box with pipes. I want one of you to go into the business of solar hot water heating because you'll make some good money. It's just plumbing, okay? Who's better at plumbing than the U.S.? Holland. Nobody. Then I have these solar tube domes, these plastic domes with grooves in them, like the grooves in these lenses right here, Fresnel lenses. And it directs sunlight into the room below. Direct sunlight in the room below more efficiently than a skylight because it's a lens instead of just a window. And then I have a watch here that's solar powered. This is a Citizen brand Eco Drive. I think you can get it at Macy's and other exotic places. And it's 10% efficient. The solar panel in this watch is about 10% efficient. On my house, they're about 15% efficient. On spacecraft, they manufacture a bunch of solar panels and then they take the ones that work the best and put those on the satellite and set it up. Those are about 30% efficient. But what if they were 80% efficient? 78% efficient, some number like that. And what if you were the person who invented it? Or you were the person who invested in it, or you were the attorney that protected the intellectual property, or you were somebody who manufactured it. You could get, dare I say it, rich! You'd be like Bill Gates, you'd be like the head of IKEA, John. And you would, dare I say it, change the world. So just keep in mind, you guys, that there's almost as much sunlight in New York State as there is in Florida. And there's enough sunlight in the Four Corners region of the U.S., New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, Wyoming. There's enough sunlight there to power the U.S. 3 times over. There's enough wind in North Dakota to power the United States, to power North America 5 times over. If we just had some way to get that energy to all of us. So transmission lines, that's what I want you guys to figure out. Better transmission lines. I met Rick Smalley, who, unlike a lot of us here, was awarded a Nobel Prize. That's hard to get those. Anyway, he's the guy, one of the guys who discovered nanotubes, Buckminster fullerenes, buckyballs. He said if you could make these things kilometers long instead of nanometers long, he says it's like the electron falls asleep at one end of the transmission line and has a dream, and wakes up at the other end with no electrical or hardly any electrical resistance. These are solvable problems, you guys. If we could come up with ways to waste less heat, if we could come up with ways to capture the energy in the wind and the sun, and if we had a way to distribute it, and especially if we had a way to store it, if you can invent the better battery, you will take over the world. You'll be like Google. To the Google. It will change the world. And so, what I want you all to do is work with technical problems of energy storage, energy transmission, energy capture. I want you to do that, but that's not going to be enough. It's also going to take this top-down thing, top-down thing. We're going to need to have a tax. Oh, I can't say the word tax. I'm sorry. I meant fee associated with carbon dioxide. If you make a lot of carbon dioxide, you pay a fee. To be mean, it's to redistribute wealth, and furthermore, it will stimulate people investing in more energy efficient means. If you got to pay a fee every time you make carbon dioxide and somebody comes up with a more efficient car, you'll use that car. Somebody comes with a more efficient blender, you'll use that blender. I mean, that's just how it's going to go. So the trouble with this is there are people now in the U.S. government who don't like government. Like, if you guys, let me just tell you, if you get a job for something like General Motors, which is a big company, and you go, you know, the first thing I'm going to do is shut it down. Like, no, dude. No. So what I'll say to all you guys is we have to get people who really want the government to do what it's supposed to do, which is run things. All right, you know, let me just say, if you have the situation where somebody asks you, do we pay teachers salaries or do we build a new baseball stadium? That would be easy, I hope. You'd pay teacher salaries. Okay? But people want a new baseball stadium. The challenge is you have to do everything all at once. So here's what I want you all to do every single time you get a chance. And that is vote. Vote. If you don't want to vote, that's how you control it. If you don't want to vote, would you please just shut up? The rest of us want to get it done. Change things. So thank you all for listening, you guys. We need to address climate change as quickly as we can, both with technical solutions from the bottom up and regulatory solutions or changes from the top down. And working together, you all can become the next great generation, and you can, dare I say it, change the world. Thank you. Let's take your questions.